My phone rang at 11:47 p.m., London time, and before the woman on the other end said one full sentence, I already knew. A mother knows. Mrs. Winfield, your husband was brought into the ER about an hour ago. He's having trouble breathing. We need you to call us back as soon as you can. I sat up in that hotel bed so fast the room spun. My husband, Alvern, has needed help walking since his stroke 6 years ago. He doesn't go anywhere alone. He doesn't get sick alone either, not without someone noticing first. My name is Lurleen Winfield. I'd flown to London for my cousin's homegoing service, the kind of trip you don't reschedule, the kind where family expects your face in the room. I never imagined I'd be standing barefoot on a hotel carpet at midnight, calling my own son to ask him to do the one thing a son should never have to be asked twice to do: check on his father. Patrick picked up on the fourth ring. I could hear music behind him, laughter, glasses. Patrick, please, check on your dad. They said he's having trouble breathing. He's at St. Vincent's right now. There was a pause, not a worried pause, an annoyed one. Mama, it's Maya's birthday. We've got people over. I can't just drop everything right now. I held the phone away from my ear like it had bit me. Your father might be dying, Patrick. He's been sick before. He's tough. I'll call the hospital in the morning. He hung up before I could answer. Not cut off, hung up. On purpose. I want you to sit with that for 1 second. The same way I had to sit with it standing in a hotel room 4,000 miles from my husband's bed. A man who calls himself a son, told his father might be dying, chose a party over a phone call to the ICU. Not even the hospital, just a phone call. If you're watching this and you've ever had a child look you dead in the eye, or dead in the ear, over a phone, and choose anything else over you, tell me where you're watching from tonight. I want to know who's sitting with me through this. I didn't sleep. I booked the first flight out of Heathrow and sat in that airport chair for 6 hours, replaying his voice. Not angry. Inconvenienced, like I'd asked him to pick up groceries. By the time I landed back in Richmond, Alvern was stable. Pneumonia from aspiration, the doctor said. Common after a stroke, dangerous if untreated quickly. He could have died waiting on a son who never called back. I didn't go home first. I didn't even go to the hospital first. I called Tobias Holloway, the lawyer who's handled our family's affairs since before Patrick could drive. Tobias, it's Lurleen. I need you to do something for me today. Take Patrick off as backup power of attorney. Take him off the emergency contact list. All of it. Today. He didn't ask me why. He's known me 30 years. He just said, consider it done, Lurleen. I felt lighter saying it than I expected. Not angry. Settled. Like setting down something I'd been carrying too long without realizing how heavy it was. I didn't tell Patrick. I didn't need to. He found out on his own 3 hours later, when he called the hospital to check Alvern's status, the way a man finally remembers to do once a party's over, and the nurse told him she couldn't release any information, because he wasn't on the list anymore. My phone rang 20 minutes after that. I looked at his name lighting up the screen, and for the first time in my life, I let it ring twice before I answered. Mama, what the hell did you do? Why am I locked out of Daddy's hospital updates? I didn't answer Patrick's question. I just hung up the same way he'd hung up on me in London. Calm, deliberate, no explanation owed. Then I drove straight to St. Vincent's, because some things matter more than a son's temper. Alvern and I bought that shop on Hull Street in 1987, back when nobody wanted a black-owned garage on that corner, and the bank made us wait 4 extra months for a loan a white man would have gotten in 2 weeks. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and Alvern had hands that could fix anything with an engine in it. I kept the books. He kept the customers coming back. 30-some years later, that shop still carries his name on the sign, and the house we raised Patrick in still carries both our sweat in the walls. Everything is in Alvern's name alone. The shop, the house. That was his choice, made before we married, back when his mother told him a man keeps his name on what he builds. I never fought him on it because I never needed paper to know what was mine. What I have is something stronger than a deed. Power of attorney, granted to me the week after his stroke 6 years ago, when the doctors told us he might not wake up clear-headed and somebody had to be ready to speak for him if he couldn't speak for himself. I've never used that power carelessly. Not once in 6 years. Yesterday was the first time. When I walked into his ICU room, the machines were quieter than they'd been on the phone call that scared me half to death in London. He was awake, tubes in his nose, voice raspy, but his eyes sharp as ever. "You didn't have to fly back early," he said. "I'm not going nowhere." "I know you're not." I took his hand. "I just needed to see your face." He studied me a moment, the way he does when he knows I'm not telling him everything. "Where's Patrick?" I didn't answer that either. Not yet. Some truths you don't hand a sick man before he's strong enough to carry them. "He'll come," I said, which wasn't quite a lie and wasn't quite the truth. A nurse named Cleotha came in to check his vitals. Kind-faced, efficient hands. The kind of woman who's seen enough families in crisis to read a room without being told anything. "Mrs. Winfield, can I speak with you outside for a second?" I followed her into the hallway, my stomach already tightening before she said a word. "I just wanted to check," she said, lowering her voice. "Is there another emergency contact besides you? We had a son listed originally, but when we tried reaching him during intake, the number was already removed from the chart this morning. Hospital administration said the account was updated." "That's correct. I had it updated." She nodded slowly, the way people do when they're choosing not to ask the question underneath the question. "I just want you to know," she said, "in case nobody's told you, since your husband was admitted, there hasn't been a single call. Not one visit. Not even after he came out of the worst of it last night." I stood there in that hallway, hands still warm from holding my husband's, and felt something settle cold and quiet in my chest. Not one call. Not even now. Patrick called 4 more times before I left the hospital parking lot. I let every one of them ring out. By the time I got home, there was a text waiting. "We need to talk. Call me back." I didn't call. I made tea instead, sat at my kitchen table, the same table Alvern built with his own hands the year Patrick turned 10, and let the silence stretch until my phone rang a 5th time. I answered that one. "Mama, finally. Look, I don't know what kind of message you're trying to send, but locking me out of Daddy's hospital information is not the way to do it. I didn't send a message, Patrick. I made a decision." "Based on what? One missed call?" "Based on you telling me he's tough and you'd call in the morning while your father was struggling to breathe." He exhaled hard into the phone, the kind of sound a man makes when he's irritated at having to explain himself to someone he thinks should already understand. "Mama, I have a family too. Maya was hurt. I almost ruined her birthday over a hospital visit that turned out not to be as bad as everyone thought. Pneumonia isn't nothing, Patrick. He's stable, isn't he? That's what you said. He's stable now. He wasn't when I called you." Silence. Then his voice shifted, quieter, more careful. "Look, just put me back as a contact. Reinstate the backup authority. I'm still his son. You stopped acting like it when I called you from London. That's not fair, isn't it?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Mama, there are things I need to stay informed about." "What things?" "Daddy's situation. The business, the house, Everything. The way he said it made me sit a little straighter. Not because of the words themselves, because of how quickly they came. Like he'd already been thinking about those things before I ever asked. "Your father is in a hospital bed," I said. "Why are you worried about the business?" "I'm worried about all of it." "Why?" "I just am." His answer came too fast. Defensive, sharp around the edges. The answer of a man trying to end a conversation instead of continue one. Then, for the first time in my life, my son said something that sounded less like concern and more like a warning. "You shouldn't make decisions this big without talking to me first." I stared at the kitchen wall. "You think removing you as emergency contact requires your permission?" That's not what I meant. But it sounded exactly like what he meant. "I have to go, Patrick." "Mama." I hung up. The kitchen went quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I sat there a long time afterward, turning that conversation over in my head. Not the missed call. Not even the hospital. The warning. "You shouldn't make decisions this big without talking to me first." Maybe another mother would have heard concern. I heard entitlement. And somewhere inside me, a door shut that I didn't know I still had open. But grief does strange things to a mother's mind. It looks for somewhere soft to land the blame. Somewhere that doesn't require believing your own child capable of something so cold. And my mind went straight to Maya. She'd been distant at the last few family dinners, quieter than usual. Patrick had been short-tempered since she got pregnant, more guarded about money, more private about what went on in their house. I told myself maybe she was the one pushing him. Maybe she was the one whispering that a growing family deserved more, needed more, should expect more. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that. Because the alternative was something I wasn't ready to hold yet. I didn't sleep that night either. I kept going back further than the phone call, further than the hospital, trying to find the exact moment my son started slipping away from the man I raised. It was February. Patrick called to tell us Maya was pregnant, and I remember crying right there in my kitchen, happy tears, already planning what I'd knit. Alvern wanted to take them both out to celebrate, his treat, the way he always did when something good happened in this family. Patrick declined, said money was tight, said they wanted to keep things quiet a while longer, save instead of spend. I didn't think much of it then. New baby, new worries, that's normal. But looking back now, that's exactly when the visits started thinning out. He stopped coming by the shop on Saturdays the way he had every week since he was old enough to hand his father a wrench. He stopped answering texts the same day. When he did call, the conversations felt shorter, more clipped, like he was checking a box instead of checking in. I asked him once if everything was all right between him and Maya. He brushed it off. "We're fine, Mama. Just adjusting." But I noticed he never quite looked at me when he said it. I told myself it was a young husband under pressure. New baby coming, bills stacking. Maybe Maya pushing him to provide more than he had to give. I'd seen it before, with other young couples in the church. A wife who wanted more than her husband could afford, and a husband too proud to say no to her, too ashamed to admit it to his own mother. I started watching Maya differently after that. The way she went quiet at dinner when money came up. The way she'd glance at Patrick before answering simple questions, like she needed his permission first. The way she'd mentioned, almost in passing, that they were looking at houses, bigger ones, in better neighborhoods. Right around the time Patrick claimed they couldn't afford a baby shower gift exchange. It fit a story I already wanted to believe. A young wife with expensive taste, whispering in my son's ear about what they deserved, about what his father owed him. It was easier to be angry at her than to sit with what Patrick himself had said on that phone call. I've waited long enough for things to be settled. A son says that on his own. No wife puts those words in a man's mouth unless he already carries the hunger for them. But grief doesn't care about easier. Grief wants somewhere to land. And Maya was close enough, foreign enough to this family by blood, to take the weight I didn't want to put on my own child. I picked up my phone before I'd even decided to. Found her number. My thumb hovered over it longer than it should have. If she was the one pushing him toward this, I needed to hear it from her face, not guess at it from my kitchen table. I texted her, "Can we talk? Just us. Tomorrow, if you're free." Her response came back fast, faster than I expected from a woman supposedly too busy whispering schemes to her husband. "Of course, Mama Lurleen. Is everything okay?" I stared at that message a long moment, something uneasy stirring beneath. My certainty. I didn't answer her question. I just told her where to meet me. Maya was already seated when I got to the diner, hands wrapped around a cup of tea she wasn't drinking. She looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with morning sickness. "Mama Lurleen." She stood halfway, like she wasn't sure if a hug was still allowed. "Is Daddy Alvern okay?" "He's stable." I sat down across from her, watching her face carefully. "No thanks to Patrick." Her brow creased. "What do you mean?" "He didn't come, Maya. Not once. Not even after I called him from London telling him his father might be dying." She blinked, and for a moment I saw something that looked like real confusion, not performance. "Patrick told me your husband had a scare, but he was stable. He said you'd already gotten things handled, and there wasn't a reason for both of us to rush down there and crowd the hospital." "Stable. That's the word he used?" "Yes." Her voice wavered slightly. "He said it more than once, actually. I asked if I should come too, and he said no. That you had it covered, and that we shouldn't make a big production out of it during my pregnancy when I should be resting." I sat back, studying her. She wasn't lying. I've raised one child and buried two parents. I know what a guilty face looks like. And Maya's wasn't it. Hers was the face of someone realizing, in real time, that she'd been handed a story instead of the truth. "He never told you I called him from London, begging him to check on his own father?" "No." Her hand came up to her mouth. "Mama Lurleen, I swear, if I'd known it was that serious, I would have driven myself." "I believe you." And I did. But belief didn't erase the rest of what I needed to ask. "Maya, has Patrick said anything to you about money? About the house? The shop? Anything tied to his father?" She hesitated. Not the hesitation of someone hiding a scheme, but the hesitation of someone realizing how much she'd let slide without asking. "He's been stressed about money since I got pregnant. He keeps saying we need to get ahead of things before the baby comes. I figured he meant saving more, budgeting better. I never asked exactly what he meant by ahead of things." "I guess." She trailed off, eyes dropping to her tea. "I guess I didn't want to know. As long as he said we'd be fine, I let it be his problem to handle." That was the part that stayed with me longest. Not a lie. Just a comfortable silence she'd let herself live inside, because asking questions might have disturbed a peace she needed. She wasn't behind this, but she also hadn't been innocent of choosing not to look. "Maya." I reached across the table, took her hand. "I need you to ask him. Tonight. Ask him exactly what he meant by ahead of things. And ask him why he told you his father was stable before he ever checked." Her eyes filled, but her jaw set hard, the way a woman's does right before she stops protecting someone. "I will," she said. "Tonight. I'm going to ask him myself, and I'm not going to let him talk around it this time." Maya called me the next morning, her voice low, like she was standing somewhere she didn't want to be overheard. She told me everything that happened the night before, and I'm telling it to you now the way she told it to me. She waited until Patrick got home from the shop. Well, what used to be his routine before he stopped showing up there too. And she didn't ease into it. She told me she'd learned that much from watching me over the years. Say it plain, or he'll talk circles around you. Patrick, your mother said she called you from London. Said your father might be dying. Why did you tell me he was stable when you didn't even know that yet? She said his face changed instantly. Not guilt, she told me. More like a man caught mid-step, deciding whether to keep walking or turn around. I didn't lie to you, Maya. I just didn't want you stressed during your pregnancy over something I figured would blow over. Something that landed him in the ICU? He's stable now, isn't he? That's not the point, Patrick. You let me believe everything was fine while your own mother was begging you to check on him. He got quiet then, she said. Sat down at their kitchen table, rubbing his hands together the way he does when he's working something out in his head before he says it out loud. Look, I've got a lot going on right now. Money's tight, the baby's coming, and I'm trying to get ahead of some things. What things? Just life, Maya. That's not an answer. He leaned back in his chair and looked away. You know how things get when people get older. Somebody has to make sure everything's organized if something happens. Maya frowned. If something happens to who? He didn't answer right away. My father. The business. The house. Everything. The words came out flat, rehearsed almost, like he'd already been having that conversation with himself long before she brought it up. Why are you talking about that now? She asked. I'm not talking about anything. You're the one turning this into something. No, Patrick. I'm asking why you've suddenly become so concerned about things that never seemed to bother you before. His jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he might answer honestly. Instead, he stood up. I'm tired. That's it? What do you want me to say? The truth would be a nice start. Something flickered across his face then. Irritation. Maybe anger. Maybe something else. Whatever it was, it vanished almost immediately. Forget it, Maya. I don't want to do this tonight. He grabbed his coat off the back of the chair like the conversation was over because he'd decided it was over. She told me she almost let him walk away. Almost. But something made her reach for his coat as he pulled it on. Maybe just to stop him. Maybe just to hold on to something solid in a conversation that had stopped making sense. That's when she felt it. A small, stiff card in the inside pocket. She pulled it halfway out before he snatched the coat away from her, more sharply than she'd ever seen him move. She only caught part of it before he turned his back to put the coat on properly. A name she didn't recognize. The word notary, printed beneath it in plain black letters. Why do you have a notary's card, Patrick? He didn't answer. He just walked out the front door without another word, leaving her standing in their kitchen with her hand still curled like she was holding the card that wasn't there anymore. And for the first time since Alvern went into that hospital, Maya told me she started wondering if Patrick wasn't merely hiding something. Maybe he was building something. And maybe he didn't want anyone asking what it was. Maya didn't tell Patrick what she planned to do next. She told me, 3 days later, over the phone, her voice steady in a way it hadn't been before. She said she waited until he was asleep, then sat in the dark of their living room with his laptop open on her knees, the blue light the only thing on in the room. She told me she felt sick doing it. Not from the pregnancy, from the betrayal of going through her own husband's things. But she said something else sat heavier than the guilt. The thought of raising a child with a man who'd hide something from his own wife, the same way he'd hidden something from his own mother. She didn't have his password, but she didn't need one. His email was already open, the way it usually is when a man stops being careful because he doesn't expect to be questioned. She searched his name first. nothing unusual. Then she searched her father-in-law's name, almost as an afterthought. And that's when something came up, a thread from 3 weeks back, before the hospital call, before any of this started, before Alvern was even sick. The subject line read, Hull Street property, documentation needed. She said her stomach turned reading the date, 3 weeks before Alvern's pneumonia, before any of this happened. Patrick had already been asking someone about paperwork tied to his father's shop, weeks before there was ever a reason to. The email was short, professional, from someone named Wendell Prelot. It mentioned needing proof of current ownership status and asked if Patrick had any existing documentation bearing the owner's signature he could provide ahead of a scheduled appointment. She didn't know who Wendell Prelot was. She'd never heard Patrick mention the name once, not at dinner, not in passing, not in 6 years of marriage. She told me she sat there a long time, laptop glowing, husband asleep 10 feet away, feeling like she was looking at a stranger's correspondence instead of her own family's life. Then she searched one more time, this time just Hull Street, to see what else might be sitting in that inbox, hidden in folders he probably thought she'd never look in. That's when she found it. A folder tucked beneath 3 layers of other folders labeled with nothing important. Old receipts, tax documents, work invoices. But this one was different. This one had his father's full legal name on it, the way it would appear on something official. Alvern Theodore Winfield. And beneath the name, a date. Not a date that had already passed. A date almost 2 weeks out. A date that hadn't happened yet. Maya said she stared at that folder for a long time before she made herself click it open, her hand hovering, her heart going harder than she expected for something that was probably just paperwork. The folder opened. Inside were only a handful of files, but the names were enough to make her sit up straighter. Property records, ownership verification, and one document she remembered clearly because it sounded so out of place. Draft transfer. She said she clicked it open just enough to see the Hull Street address near the top before footsteps sounded somewhere down the hallway. She barely had time to close the window. Patrick's voice came from behind her, sleep still thick in it. Maya. She turned so fast the laptop nearly slipped from her knees. What are you doing on my laptop? For a second, neither of them moved. Then Patrick's eyes dropped to the screen. Not angry, not confused, alarmed. Just for a moment. A moment so brief another person might have missed it. But Maya didn't. And later, when she told me about that night, she said that look bothered her more than any argument could have. Because people get angry when they're interrupted. They get frightened when they're caught. Alvern's color came back before his strength did. By the 5th day, the tubes were gone from his nose, and he could sit up on his own, the pneumonia finally loosening its grip on his chest. The doctor said his lungs were clearing faster than expected for a man his age with his history. Strong heart, the doctor told me, checking his chart. Stubborn man too, I'd guess. You'd guess right, I said. Alvern smiled at that, the first real smile I'd seen from him since London. But the smile didn't last long once the room got quiet, and it was just the two of us again. Lurleen. He said my name, the way he does when he's about to ask something he already suspects the answer to. How many days has it been since I got here? 5. And how many times has Patrick called? I busied myself straightening the blanket over his legs, buying a few seconds I didn't really need. He's been dealing with some things at home, Alvern. Maya's pregnant. You know that's a lot on a young couple. That's not what I asked you. I looked up. 41 years of marriage, and I still haven't found a way to lie to that man's face and have it land soft. He hasn't called, I said. Not once. Alvern didn't react the way I expected. No anger, no raised voice, just a long, slow breath out through his nose. The kind a man takes when something he already feared gets confirmed instead of disputed. Not even when you told him I almost died? No. He turned his face toward the window, jaw working slightly. The muscle there going tight and loose, tight and loose. I let him sit with it. Some things a man needs quiet to carry, not comfort. I raised that boy to show up, he said finally, voice low. Show up for family, show up for work, show up when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I don't know where that lesson went. It's not your fault, Alvern. Didn't say it was my fault. Said I don't know where it went. I didn't have an answer for that, so I just held his hand until a knock came at the door. Roosevelt Tillman, leaning on his cane, grinning the way he always does, holding a small bag of peppermints like he'd been bringing them to that shop for 20 years. Heard you were laid up, old man. Had to come see for myself. Alvern's face brightened some, genuine this time. The two of them fell into easy talk, engines, weather, somebody's truck that needed a transmission, until Roosevelt mentioned something almost as an afterthought, the way men do when they don't realize what they're handing over. Hey, your boy stopped by the shop a few weeks back, before all this happened. Asked Frederica something strange. Alvern looked up. What kind of strange? Wanted to know who all still had keys to your filing cabinet in the back office. Asked whether anybody besides you still went in there regularly. The room seemed to grow quieter. I thought maybe you sent him after some paperwork, Roosevelt continued. Didn't think much of it. Alvern sat very still. Filing cabinet, he repeated slowly. That's what he asked about. I felt my husband's hand tighten around mine. Not hard, just enough. The way a man reacts when a puzzle piece suddenly lands where it shouldn't. Lurleen, he said quietly, still looking at Roosevelt. Do you remember what I keep in that cabinet? I did. Property records, business documents, old legal files. The kinds of papers nobody thinks about until suddenly they're all anybody can think about. A feeling I couldn't name moved through me. Not fear, not yet. Something closer to recognition. Because for the first time since Patrick ignored that phone call from London, I found myself wondering if these were separate problems at all. Or if we'd been looking at the same problem from two different directions the entire time. I didn't know about any of this yet. Not when it happened. It would come out piece by piece over the days that followed. Told to me later by people who had no reason to lie about what they saw. But it happened 3 days after Roosevelt mentioned that filing cabinet. And it happened exactly the way I feared once I finally let myself imagine the worst of my own son. Patrick walked into a small notary office on Midlothian Turnpike, the kind tucked between a check-cashing place and a hair salon. He carried a manila folder under his arm and a practiced calm on his face, the same calm he probably used in every business meeting he'd ever walked into. Inside the folder was a quitclaim deed, a document that would transfer ownership of the Hull Street shop. At the bottom sat Alvern's signature, or something close enough to pass for it if you didn't know his handwriting well. The notary's name was Glorianne Pickett. She'd been doing this work 18 years, and 18 years teaches a woman to notice things most people miss. I'll need your father to sign this in front of me, she said, sliding the folder back across the desk. The signer has to be present. He's homebound, Patrick said smoothly, recovering from an illness. I have power of attorney to handle things for him. Do you have the power of attorney document with you? He didn't. That was the first crack. I can get it to you. I just need this handled today. Glorianne studied him for a moment. Then she asked for identification. Patrick handed over his own without hesitation. When she asked for documentation related to his father, he produced an old driver's license, years out of date. A younger version of Alvern stared back from the photo. "This expired years ago," Glorianne said. "He hasn't needed a new one. Like I said, he's homebound. Mr. Winfield, I can't notarize this." The calm on Patrick's face shifted slightly. "Why not?" "Because the signer isn't here. Because I haven't seen valid identification from the signer. And because property transfers require a lot more than someone walking in and telling me they have authority." Patrick's jaw tightened. "I was told this would be straightforward." "I'm sure you were." She pushed the folder back toward him. "But it won't be happening here." For a moment, she thought he might argue. Instead, he gathered the papers, slipped them back into the folder, and stood. The conversation was over. The same way it had been over when Maya asked questions he didn't want to answer. The same way it always seemed to be over whenever someone got too close to whatever he was hiding. Glorianne watched him leave. Then she moved on to her next customer. To her, it was simply another refusal. Another stranger asking for something she wasn't willing to sign. By closing time, she probably hadn't thought about Patrick Winfield once. But Patrick thought about her. Because he left that office carrying the same folder he'd walked in with. The deed wasn't recorded. Nothing had changed hands. Whatever he had been trying to do had failed, at least for now. And when a man walks away from a plan without getting what he came for, there's always the same question waiting behind him. Was he finished? Or was he simply looking for another way? Alvern had been drifting in and out that afternoon. Worn out from a round of physical therapy, they'd started to get his strength back. I sat in the chair beside his bed, watching his chest rise and fall slow and even, when my phone rang. Tobias Holloway's name lit up the screen. I stepped half into the hallway, but the room was small, and I didn't think to close the door all the way. I assumed Alvern was asleep. I was wrong. "Lurleen," Tobias said, his voice low and careful. "I looked into those questions you had after Roosevelt's visit." My stomach tightened. "And?" "You were right to be concerned." The hallway suddenly felt smaller. "What did you find?" "Nothing filed. Nothing transferred. The property is still exactly where it should be." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. But Tobias wasn't finished. "However, I did learn something else." "What?" "After you called me, I reached out to a title company I work with regularly and a local records consultant I trust. I wanted to know whether anybody had been asking questions about transferring commercial property tied to the Hull Street address." I leaned against the wall. "Tobias?" "It was Patrick." For a moment, I couldn't speak. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." Both people remembered him because he specifically asked about transferring property owned by an elderly parent. One of them even kept notes from the conversation. My stomach dropped. What exactly was he asking? The kind of questions people ask when they're trying to understand ownership records, transfer requirements, and what documents would be needed to move property from one person to another. I closed my eyes. The filing cabinet, the questions, the distance, the hospital. All of it suddenly felt less separate than it had before. "He said it was routine family planning. That's how he presented it." "And you believed him?" "I didn't think much of it at the time." His voice grew quieter. "I do now." I pressed a hand against the wall. "Lurleen," Tobias said carefully, "I'm not accusing him of a crime. Not yet. Asking questions isn't illegal. But if I were you, I'd start paying very close attention to what your son is doing." I didn't answer right away. I was trying to find the floor under my own feet again. "I'll call you back." I ended the call and stood there a moment longer than I needed to, gathering myself before going back in. But when I turned around, Alvern's eyes were open, fully open, watching me from the bed. His face was unreadable in a way that scared me more than if he'd been shouting. "You heard that?" It wasn't a question. "Every word." I came back to the chair beside him and reached for his hand, but he didn't take it right away. He just stared at the ceiling, breathing slow, deliberate breaths. The kind a man takes when he's trying not to let his heart rate spike on a monitor that's still watching him. "My own son," he said finally, voice flat, stripped of everything but disbelief. "Making inquiries about my property while I'm laying in this bed. Alvern, don't." He held up a hand. Not harsh, just final. "I need a minute, Lurleen. Just let me have a minute." I gave him that minute, then another. The machines beeped steadily beside us, indifferent to what they were measuring. When he finally spoke again, his voice had changed. Quieter, but harder underneath. Like something in him had finished breaking and started setting. "Call Tobias back. I will. We'll figure out what to do about Patrick. Not about that." He turned his head toward me, eyes clear and steady, despite everything his body had been through. "I don't want to ask him about Patrick right now. I want you to ask him something else." "What?" "I want to know if Maya knew any of this." He held my gaze. "Before you say another word to my son, I need to know whether his wife is standing beside him in this, or standing somewhere else entirely." I called Tobias back from the hallway, and I asked him exactly what Alvern told me to ask. "Has Maya reached out to you at all? Anything about Patrick? About the property? Anything?" "No," Tobias said. "Nothing from her. Why?" "Just needed to know." I felt something ease slightly in my chest, even surrounded by everything else falling apart. Whatever Patrick had done, he'd done it alone. I carried that small mercy back into the room and told Alvern. "Maya didn't know. Tobias hasn't heard a word from her." Alvern nodded slowly, like a man setting down one weight before picking up a heavier one. "Good," he said. "That's good." Then he fell quiet. Not the tired quiet of a man recovering from pneumonia. The thinking, quiet. The kind that settles over someone staring at a memory instead of a hospital ceiling. I watched his eyes drift toward the window. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he shook his head once. "I taught that boy how to change oil before he was tall enough to reach the hood latch." I said nothing. "He used to sit on a milk crate in the shop and hand me tools. Half the time he'd give me the wrong one and we'd both laugh about it." A faint smile touched his face, then disappeared. I kept telling myself there had to be another explanation. "Alvern." "I know what I heard, Lurleen." His voice wasn't angry. That somehow made it worse. I just needed a few minutes to stop hearing it as a father and start hearing it as the man whose name was on that paperwork. The room went quiet again. Then, after a long breath, "Get Tobias on the phone again. I want to talk to him myself this time." "Alvern, you should rest. Let me handle Lurleen." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the same weight it always had in 41 years of marriage, the tone that meant the conversation was finished before it started. "This is my name on that deed. My shop. My signature he stole. I'm not laying in this bed letting my wife clean up what my son did to me. I'm still his father. I can still speak for myself." I dialed Tobias and put the phone to Alvern's ear myself, since the IV line made it awkward for him to hold it steady. "Tobias, it's Alvern." "Alvern, good to hear your voice. How are you feeling?" "Feeling like a man whose son tried to steal his shop out from under him." "Lurleen told you what happened?" "She did." "I'm sorry, Alvern. This isn't easy to hear. I need you to do two things today. First, I want every protection available placed on the Hull Street property and the house. Title monitoring, fraud notifications, whatever needs to be filed. If anybody tries to move paperwork on either property, I want it caught before it gets anywhere." "That can be done," Tobias said. "I'll start the filings today." Second. Alvern's voice didn't waver, even though I could see his jaw tighten with the effort of saying it. I've spent the last hour hoping I could find a reason not to do this. The room went still. But a son who waits for his father to die is one thing. A son who tries to help it along with paperwork is another. His eyes closed briefly. When they opened again, the decision was already made. Take Patrick out of my will, entirely. Whatever he was set to receive, redistribute it. I don't care how you word it, just make sure there's nothing left for him to wait on anymore. There was a pause on the line, the kind that told me even Tobias, a man who'd seen plenty of ugly family business in 30 years of practice, felt the weight of what he'd just been asked to do. Alvern, I'll get it done. But I want to be straight with you about something. Go ahead. Once these protections are in place and the estate documents are updated, Patrick is eventually going to realize something changed. Between the property safeguards, the questions he's already been asking, and the access he's already lost at the hospital, it won't take much for him to figure out people are paying closer attention than they were before. Alvern closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, there was no hesitation left in his face. Let him figure it out, he said. For once in his life, let him deal with the consequences before somebody rushes in to protect him. The room went quiet after that. Not angry quiet, not grieving quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when a decision has finally been made, and nobody in the room is pretending it hasn't. Maya told me this part herself, days later, her voice breaking in places she clearly hadn't expected it to. She'd gone out to Patrick's car that morning to grab her sunglasses she'd left in the glove compartment days before. He was inside the house, still asleep, and she figured it'd take 30 seconds, in and out, nothing more. The glove compartment was cluttered the way his always was. Old receipts and a phone charger tangled together. Her sunglasses had slid toward the back, and when she reached for them, her hand brushed against a folded manila envelope wedged beneath the owner's manual. She almost left it alone. She told me that part clearly, like she needed me to know she hadn't gone looking for it. But something about the way it was hidden, tucked, flat against the back of the compartment like it wasn't meant to be found, made her pull it out anyway. Inside was the quitclaim deed. She recognized Alvern's name first, then the Hull Street address, then, lower down, a signature that was supposed to be her father-in-law's. She told me she stared at that signature a long time because something about it looked wrong. Too careful, too still. Nothing like the loose, confident scrawl she'd seen Alvern use signing birthday cards and Christmas checks for 6 years. Behind the deed was a second piece of paper, this one typed, official-looking, with a notary's letterhead at the top. A refusal notice. The words swam in front of her. Signer not present. Identification expired. Documentation inconsistent. But the meaning landed clear enough. Patrick had tried to steal his father's shop while his father lay in a hospital bed, recovering from a near-death pneumonia. And it had only failed because a stranger behind a desk had done her job properly. Maya said, she sat in that car a long time, engine off, the morning sun heating the windshield, one hand resting on the small curve of her stomach without her even realizing she'd put it there. She thought about the baby first. Not Patrick. Not even Alvern in that moment. She thought about a child who would grow up calling this man daddy. And what kind of daddy forges a dying man's signature to steal what isn't his? She thought about the house they'd been looking at, the one with the bigger yard, the one Patrick said they could manage soon, once things were settled. She understood now exactly what he'd meant by settled, and the word turned her stomach in a way morning sickness never had. She had 2 choices sitting in that car, and she knew both of them could end her marriage before her child ever took a first breath. She could walk back inside, deed in hand, and confront Patrick directly. give him one last chance to explain himself, to deny it, to somehow make this make sense. Or she could drive straight to Lurlene's house and lay it all on the table. No warning, no chance for Patrick to talk his way around it first. She sat there with the envelope trembling slightly in her hands, the engine still off, the choice pressing down on her harder than anything had in her entire marriage. Maya didn't go back inside that house. She drove straight to mine, envelope on the passenger seat beside her, hands tight on the wheel the whole way, like letting go might make her change her mind. I opened the door and saw her face before she said a word. Pale, jaw set, eyes red-rimmed but dry. The look of a woman who'd already done her crying in private and arrived ready to act instead. "Mama Lurleen, I need you to see something." She handed me the envelope right there on my porch, didn't even wait to come inside. I opened it standing in my own doorway and felt my knees nearly go when I saw that forged signature, my husband's name twisted into something that wasn't his hand at all. "Where did you find this?" "His car. This morning." Her voice cracked slightly. "I wasn't looking for it, but once I found it, I couldn't put it back like I never saw it." I pulled her inside, sat her down at my kitchen table. The same table where I'd first turned Patrick's words over like a stone 3 weeks before. I called Tobias before I even offered her tea. "Tobias, I need you to come by the house. Maya's here. She has something you need to see in person." He arrived within the hour, reading glasses already in hand before he sat down across from her. Maya laid out everything: the deed, the refusal letter, the notary's letterhead. Her voice steadier now that the worst of the telling was behind her. "This corroborates everything the Notaries Association reported," Tobias said, studying the documents carefully. "Same date, same property, same forged signature pattern." "What does this mean for Patrick?" Maya asked, and I heard something in her voice that wasn't quite asking for mercy, but wasn't quite ready to abandon hope for him either. Tobias took his glasses off slowly, the way he does when he's about to say something he wishes he didn't have to. "This isn't just a family matter anymore. A refused notarization on its own might have stayed quiet, handled privately between you all. But combined with this forged deed as physical evidence, it's enough to file a formal complaint with the state. And given the nature of it, forging a signature for a property transfer, they'll likely refer it for criminal forgery review." The kitchen went silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator, same as it had weeks ago when Patrick first slipped and told me he'd waited long enough. Maya's hand found mine across the table, and I held it the way I'd wanted to hold her the very first day I wrongly suspected her of pushing my son toward all of this. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have asked more questions sooner. I should have—" "You're here now," I said. "That's what matters." Tobias gathered the documents carefully into a folder of his own. "I'll file the complaint first thing tomorrow morning. Once it's submitted, there's no pulling it back." Maya nodded, steadying herself with a breath. "Do it." I watched my son's wife say those 2 words with more courage than I'd seen from my own child in weeks, and I understood, sitting there, that whatever alliance I'd needed in this fight had just walked through my front door and chosen truth over the man she married. Tobias called Patrick himself, kept his voice level and ordinary, the way a man does when he wants someone walking into a room with their guard down instead of up. "Patrick, I need you to come by the office. Some matters concerning your father's estate need addressing, given everything that's happened with his hospitalization." Patrick agreed. Easily, even sounded relieved, Tobias told me later. Probably assumed this was about reinstating him, smoothing over the mess from the hospital, maybe even formalizing whatever he thought he was owed once Alvern's health stabilized. He had no idea the fraud alert had already gone through. No idea The state complaint had already been filed that morning. No idea his wife had sat at his mother's kitchen table 3 days earlier and handed over the very proof that sealed everything before he ever knew it was happening. I wasn't in the room when it happened, but Tobias told me every detail afterward, and Maya confirmed it from where she sat quietly in the corner, present, but saying nothing. There only because Tobias felt she had a right to witness the end of what she'd started. Patrick walked in with his usual easy confidence, the same tone he'd used with me on every phone call since the hospital, assured, a little impatient, a man who still believed he held some leverage in this family. "Tobias, what's this about? Mama said you handled some paperwork while Daddy was sick. I'm guessing we're here to sort out putting things back the way they should be." Tobias didn't answer right away. He simply slid a folder across the desk. Patrick opened it, and Tobias watched his face change in real time. Confidence draining first into confusion, then into something closer to panic as he recognized what was in front of him. The quitclaim deed, his own forged version of his father's signature. The notary's refusal letter, dated and stamped, already logged with the state board. "Where did you—" "It doesn't matter where it came from, Patrick," Tobias said evenly. "What matters is, it's already been filed. A fraud alert is active on both properties, and your father has formally removed you from his will, effective as of yesterday morning." Patrick stared at him. Then, for the first time, the panic gave way to anger. "This is insane!" Nobody answered. "I'm his son." Still, nobody answered. "I wasn't trying to steal anything. I was trying to protect what belongs to this family." Tobias folded his hands. "By forging your father's signature?" Patrick's jaw tightened. "You don't understand. Somebody has to think ahead. Daddy's getting older. The shop would have come to me eventually anyway." The room went silent. Even Maya looked down. Because the problem wasn't what he said. It was how easily he said it. Like the possibility of his father's death had become an administrative detail instead of a tragedy. Tobias's voice stayed calm. "Your father is alive, Patrick." Patrick opened his mouth, then closed it again. The sentence seemed to land harder than anything else. A long silence followed. Then Tobias slid one final document across the desk. "The complaint has already been filed." Whatever argument Patrick still had left died right there. "Daddy did that? Not Mama?" "Your father, personally, by phone, fully lucid, with me as witness." Patrick's eyes moved across the room then, and that's when he saw Maya sitting in the corner, hands folded over her stomach, watching him with an expression that held no malice, only exhaustion, and something close to grief. "You gave them this?" His voice cracked on the question. "I found it in your car, Patrick." Her voice was steady, steadier than his. "I didn't go looking for a reason to leave you. You handed me one." He looked back at Tobias, then at the folder, then at Maya again, searching each face for some crack he could slide through, some version of events he could still spin. There wasn't one. The paperwork had already moved. The complaint had already been filed. His mother had acted weeks ago. His father had acted independently, without needing her permission. And now his own wife had confirmed it all before he'd said a single word in his own defense. For the first time since that phone call from London, Patrick had nothing left to say. The state took the complaint seriously. An investigation opened within weeks. Tobias told me the evidence was strong enough that there wasn't much room for misunderstanding. The refused notarization, the deed itself, the questions Patrick had been asking about the property before Alvern ever got sick, all of it pointing in the same direction. This wasn't panic. It was planning. The legal process moved at its own pace after that. Interviews were conducted, documents were reviewed. Eventually, formal forgery charges followed. I didn't go to any of it. Alvern didn't either. Some things a parent doesn't need to witness to understand are real. Alvern came home 3 weeks after that first ER call, walking slower than before, but walking on his own, refusing the cane longer than his doctor recommended out of pure stubbornness. I set him up in his recliner by the window, the one that looks out over the same street he's driven down to that shop 10,000 times in 40 years. A week after he came home, Tobias stopped by with one last stack of paperwork. Nothing dramatic, just signatures, trust documents, updated estate papers, the kinds of documents families usually handle quietly. When he left, the shop and the house were protected in ways they hadn't been before, insulated from exactly the sort of scheme that had nearly unfolded. Alvern watched Tobias pull away through the window. "That should do it," he said. "You feel better?" "No." He shook his head. "I just feel finished." That answer stayed with me. Not angry, not relieved. Finished. Like a man finally accepting a truth he'd spent weeks trying not to believe. "You did right," he told me one evening, watching the streetlights flicker on. Calling Tobias that first night. "I know you didn't do it thinking about money or property. You did it because a son who won't check on his dying father doesn't get to hold power over what happens to him. I didn't do it to punish him, Alvern." "I know." He nodded toward the window. "That's exactly why it worked the way it did. Maya called me not long after the investigation became official. She'd moved into her sister's place by then, said she couldn't stay in a house built on questions she could no longer ignore. Then she told me something she hadn't told anyone else yet. She'd met with her own attorney. Not about Patrick's criminal case, about her future. "I need stability for the baby," she said quietly. "And I don't think I can build that with someone I no longer trust." I closed my eyes. Not because I was surprised, because hearing it out loud made it final. She told me she still planned to keep the baby close to this family, regardless of what happened with Patrick, regardless of what a courtroom eventually decided. "He's still the baby's father," she said. "I can't erase that. But I won't raise a child to think what he did was just a mistake people forgive and forget. You don't have to choose between us and him, Maya. You're still my family. That baby will always be my grandchild." She cried on the phone for a while after that, and I let her, the way I wished someone had let me cry in that London hotel room the night this all started. Patrick called once, from a number I didn't recognize, maybe borrowed, maybe new. I almost didn't answer. I did anyway. "Mama." His voice sounded smaller than I'd ever heard it. "I know you probably hate me right now." "I don't hate you, Patrick. I grieve you." "That's different." He didn't have anything to say to that. We sat in silence a moment, two people who used to know each other, completely. Now strangers separated by choices only one of us made. "I hope one day you understand what you actually lost wasn't the shop," I told him before I hung up. "It was every single person who would have stood beside you, no questions asked, if you'd just shown up the one time it mattered most." I think about that phone call from London sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet, and Alvern's breathing settles steady beside me. People ask me now if I regret moving so fast, cutting him off before I even understood the why behind it. I don't regret it. I wasn't trying to win a war against my own son. I was simply unwilling to keep handing trust to someone who'd already shown me, plainly, that he didn't deserve to hold it anymore.